You are listening to Reinvented. I'm your host, Jen Eckhart, and this is a very special episode of my podcast. I feel like I say that a lot because I'm biased and I think every episode of Reinvented is special, but this is the first time I've ever had an active duty soldier in the U.S. Army on this podcast. And the coolest part is she, yep, I said she, is not only an active duty soldier in the Army serving as an all-course intelligence analyst, but did I mention she's made history as the first ever active duty military service member to represent the state of Colorado and the United States Army at the 100th anniversary Miss America competition. Hell yeah. This girl takes the idea of reinvention to a whole other level, and she's a patriot. Maura Spence-Carroll, welcome to Reinvented.
Thank you again so much for having me. I'm very excited to, get into the nuts and bolts of everything. I have my crown with me if you want me to pull it out at any point.
Oh, we will most certainly be having you pull your crown out. It's not often that I have someone on my show who changes out of her fatigues and combat boots into evening gown attire. I dig it. Like, I dig the versatility. I just love that you show that women can be multifaceted. I also feel especially honored to have you on today because I know, according to your PR agent, that you had to be granted special permission from your public affairs officer in the Army to appear on this podcast. Who can I send a gift basket to? Because I don't feel worthy of this honor, but I'm just so grateful you managed to pull it off. I am curious, how does that process work? Like, if you do have an interview or a podcast appearance or a TV appearance, is it difficult to go to the Army and be like, hey, I gotta go be on TV? For some reason in my mind, I had like this vision of them being like, sure, you can do the interview, drop and give me 20. Or like, you have to do X number of pull-ups or push-ups before you go on the Reinvented podcast. I was like waiting to hear back from your public affairs officer, but we made it happen. And I am just so excited to have you here.
I was just very lucky in that when I started competing for Miss Colorado and I was getting ready, our brigade public affairs officer at the time, Captain Parker, now Major, was very supportive of the whole thing. He knew that I wanted to talk about—
And a guy, no less. Like, that's so cool.
Yeah. And he knew that I wanted to talk about military suicide prevention. And that's very important to our military today, is talking about the ways that we can help soldiers and prevent them from feeling like they have no other options. And so he worked with me. And eventually I started working a lot more closely with the division staff, with the public affairs officer there, Lieutenant Colonel Sanders, who is so wonderful to work with. So it's less of, there are some interviews I can do and some interviews I can't, and more of, we need to make sure that it's in line with my branding, with the Army's. And then we just, we go through and we discuss the things that we want to hit on. And
Yeah.
It's also been wonderful working with her and with the entire public affairs staff of the 4th Infantry Division, because they've helped me do things that I never thought would be possible. I actually just got back from the Pentagon, and I got to speak to the Sergeant Major of the Army. And I also got to talk to the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army. So that was, again, an opportunity.
Were you talking to them about your platform, which is mental health, which we're going to get into later in the interview, but was that what you were there for?
Yes. So we were talking about suicide prevention, and it was
Wow.
very interesting to talk to leadership because, again, I'm a regular soldier. I'm a specialist. I'm 22 years old. And
you're so young, and you're having meetings at the Pentagon. Oh my gosh, Maura.
It was surreal. I was walking around at one point, and in the middle of the Pentagon, there's this little cafe, and it's a no hat, no salute area. Usually we have to wear a PC when we're outside. And there's just colonels and generals walking around, and I'm walking around, a specialist in my little uniform. I was like, I don't know how I got here.
What inspired you? Like you said, you were 22 years old. How old were you when you first joined the military? And what inspired you to do so at such a young age?
I made the decision. So I started looking into it when I was 17. And on my 18th birthday, I woke up in the middle of the night and I was kind of like, what am I going to do with my life? Because I was at a point where I knew that if I had all these things I wanted to accomplish, and I had all these things I wanted to do, and I looked at the life that I was living and I was like, I'm not really living. I'm just kind of existing. I'm getting through day to day.
That's deep at 18 years old. Wow.
Yeah. And
I'm like, what party am I going to go to? Do I have cheerleading practice? Oh, do I? Yeah.
oh, but yeah, I mean, I also graduated high school a year early. So that helps me to go like, oh my gosh, I'm an adult now. And it was kind of a meltdown where I realized like I can do anything that I want with my life. And then I can do anything I want in my life. And I decided I might as well make it a good one. So I called up a recruiter that day, and I had been talking to him on and off, but I think he assumed that I was just never going to call him back. And I was like, "Hey, Sarn, I'm ready to go. Let's get the paperwork started. Let's sign, and I want to join the army."
Right.
And a week later, or a week and a half later, I was at the military processing center where you first swear in, and I signed my first contract at 18 years old on February 2nd, 2018.
I read somewhere that your grandfather was in the U.S. Air Force and had also played a monumental role in inspiring you to join the armed forces.
I grew up in a single parent household for most of my life.
Wow.
So it was just my mom and I against the world. And my grandparents and I were also very close, because when my mom she was a touring musician for a while. And then when she, said goodbye to music and focused on just earning money and taking care of me, she would have to work really long hours. And so I would go to school, before school, I'd go to my grandparents' house because their house was close to the bus stop, and I would stay with them afterwards. We just spent a lot of time together. And my grandfather he was a stoic man. He was a great storyteller. Have you ever seen the movie Big Fish?
I have. It's one of my favorite movies.
It's one of my favorites. So we always say
it's emotional, but it's a good emotional. And it's just a reminder of how much families matter and human connection. And it's emotional. It's very deep.
And we always said that's his story because he could spin a yarn. And my grandmother's name is actually Sandra Kay. So that was another connection. It's like, oh, okay, that's his movie. So he passed away, unfortunately, in 2016 when I had officially moved in full time with my grandparents. And I spent a really long time, even today, trying to decide how I was going to carry on his legacy. Because he was a man who believed in loving for the sake of loving, giving for the sake of giving, and doing whatever you could to make the world a better place, just because we all have the opportunity to. Not because you're going to get any glory for it, or because it's just the right thing to do.
I just got chills. Amazing. Yeah. Well, he sounds like an incredible man, and we thank him for his service. And what better way to honor his legacy than his granddaughter making history the way that you are. It's no secret that there is a certain stigma attached to pageantry. I've had opportunities myself to enter pageants. I decided against that route, but I feel like if it were presented to me today, it would pique my interest just because of how much it is evolving, very much like the military. I think the world is rapidly changing. I just had former Miss America and advocate and journalist Gretchen Carlson on my show. How did your fellow, compatriots react when you approached them and you were like, yeah, I'm going to go compete in the Miss America competition? And you can be honest here, did they scoff at you? Were there any mean girl catty comments made, or were they just largely supportive?
I mean, I was open about the fact that I wanted to be Miss America one day, starting in basic training. And I tried to keep it a secret, but eventually I was on a FaceTime call during basic. It was one of the few we had. And my friend was saying, how excited are you that you could be going to Miss America this year? One of my buddies was like, what?
Let the cat out of the bag. Whoops.
And so then we started talking about it. And I think that there's something that people don't realize. Once you meet a title holder, most people, if you know them first, aren't going to go, oh, well, my opinion of you is completely changed. They already knew who I was. And if there were people who judged me or said oh, I think that's so stupid, they didn't say it to my face, so I don't care about it anyway. And for the most part, the people I surrounded myself with were very supportive. And that continued throughout my career, not just the leadership, but my friends and my coworkers and the other people in my unit, which I'm in an infantry battalion, so it's mostly dudes. Everyone knows I'm a huge Captain America, Steve Rogers fan. So they started calling me Specialist Colorado after I won Miss Colorado, which was really funny because I had some of the leadership in my battalion because I'm in the S2, which means I handle security management, clearances, things like that, and the intelligence sector. And they would write emails and they would address me as Specialist Colorado in the email chains, which is so funny. And also really confused a lot of the new people to the unit because they were like, I don't understand, because this is what I look like at work. People, they meet me and they're like, oh, Miss Colorado's a soldier. I'm like, yeah, all of us have jobs.
You shared on your Instagram a quote that read, ahem, taps mic, you're more likely to have a son play in the Super Bowl than have a daughter compete at Miss America. That like blew my mind. Explain the statistic and why it's important.
So you can only compete at Miss America one time. And there are 51 women who go to Miss America every year, not counting in 2020 because the competition was, withheld because of COVID. And I'm not good with football, but I know there's more than 52 people that go to the Super Bowl.
You can play the Super Bowl on a team more than once. That I know.
You can go more than once. So if you take that into account, it's really phenomenal to think that if you have a son and a daughter and your son plays the Super Bowl one day and your daughter competes at Miss America, well, your daughter's the one who's really pulling for the family right there because she made history and beat the odds more than ever, especially when you consider, Miss America is officially a competition, but if you think about the pageant world, it's huge and most people don't see it. Right. I remember there are state competitions in the Miss America organization that have 60 candidates competing for the job every single year. And then you have to have at least, I believe it's 4 girls competing for one local title. So you have thousands of women across the country who are all competing for the chance to walk on the Miss America stage.
Wow.
And
it's fierce. Yeah. And you only get one shot. If you don't make it, you can't go back.
Yeah. That's the hard thing to explain to people too. They always ask me like, so you're going to do it again? I'm like, I can't.
Well, listen, you're a finalist in my eyes, in my heart, and definitely for the rest of our country. You're not just an active duty soldier in the U.S. Army stationed at Fort Carson, Colorado, but you're a student and you plan to transfer to the University of Colorado utilizing your scholarship awards to graduate, hopefully debt-free with a bachelor's degree in communications. That's what I studied. Your future plan, though, includes pursuing a Juris Doctorate and working for the American Civil Liberties Union. Yet another career invention. It's just incredible to watch, especially when you're just age 22 years old. We're all about reinventing oneself here on the Reinvented with Jen Eckhart podcast. But I have to know, to what do you attribute, Maura, as being sort of that driving force behind being able to reinvent yourself constantly and wear so many hats? Like, what's your secret?
I think a lot of it is self-reflection. And I grew up in a single parent home. And the thing my mom would always stress to me growing up is she was like, you need to get a college degree. You need to finish school. You need to do something. I don't care what it is. I just hope that you enjoy it and that it's something that will allow you to build a life that you can live and that you don't just have to exist through. Wow. And so I had ADHD. I was undiagnosed growing up. So school was really hard for me. And it was difficult for me to say, like, I knew from a young age I wanted to be an attorney, but I also knew you had to be really good at school. And I just wasn't. And I would take these tests and I would do super well on tests. And then I would struggle in class if I had to pay attention for too long, or if we had homework we took home. And it wasn't until I was diagnosed that I was like, oh, this makes sense. And now I have a way that I can work past it. And instead of working against my brain, I can work with it. And so that's another reinvention I had in my life. These last couple of years, if you met me at 16 or 17, you would never go like, oh yeah, she's going to be the first active duty soldier to compete at Miss America and she's going to go to Miss America. You'd go like, she's sweet.
The Today Show did an amazing feature on you about your platform, shining a light on mental health in the military. You know firsthand the barriers to care that exist for military members seeking mental health help after being diagnosed, like you said, with ADHD back in 2020. What is the stigma that surrounds receiving mental health treatment in the military community? And how are you challenging it with your platform?
When I first won Miss Colorado, I was like, all we need to do is end the stigma. And we end the stigma and then people go get help and then everything is solved. It's not that easy. And then I did a lot more research. I was like, oh, this is a doozy. And then I started talking to leadership and I realized that I mean, the military, I mean, these leaders, they care deeply and they're trying to solve the problem, but it's a bear to try and wrestle with.
Right.
And the thing that I've noticed most of all is that peer to peer, there is a stigma that exists. And that's because you have to develop this kind of shell to be able to serve, especially for people who serve in the combat arms roles or in the heavy support roles. You have
Now,
to
when
be
you
able
say
to,
shell, you mean like they put up this tough
yeah,
disguise, like, yeah,
this
right.
wall of, because I mean, if you think about it, when you're on a deployment, and I haven't deployed yet, I still want to, but I have lots of friends who have, and they say, there's no time to really dwell on like, oh, I'm sad. You just have to kind of suck it
Right.
up and finish out your mission.
Right. I
But
get
that's
that.
why it's so important to talk about proactive care, preventative care. That
Preventative.
we need to start monitoring soldiers, not just when they're struggling, but we need to give them resources so that they can stay afloat when things get a little bit harder. We need to have leaders. I mean, like team leaders, squad leaders. These are, the very basic levels of leadership who have 5 to 10 soldiers each, who are
Right.
able to notice when someone's struggling and give them skills to deal with that in a healthy way.
Right.
And I mean, peer to peer is the biggest challenge that I've noticed.
Right.
And so there's a lot that we can do by just speaking up. I mean, I talk very openly. I talked about the fact that I care about suicide prevention. I told a 4-star general, General Joseph Martin, the Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, that I care about prevention because I've been suicidal and I've
Right.
attempted to take my own life. And I know what it feels like to be there, but I also know that on the other side is a whole other world of possibilities.
Yeah. That there's
And I
hope.
hope there's hope. And my hope is that in sharing my story and showing people that, if you have a good supportive chain of command and leadership and friends who support you in a community that you feel connected to, then there is a way to increase your quality of life and
Yeah.
live your life, not just move through it because you have to.
I totally agree with your sentiment. I mean, I've always said that mental health is health. And I think we're getting kind of to a better place in society where we are recognizing that female veterans, I read, are more likely to die by suicide than their civilian counterparts, mostly due to the access and willingness to use firearms as opposed to other means of self-harm. It sounds really dark, but like those are the facts. Veterans, service members are more likely to commit suicide than the average civilian. I mean, these statistics are heartbreaking. And these are our men and women in uniform who deserve to know that they're not alone and that they matter. And, even at doing the highest duty, the serving our country, it's possible to ask for help and to receive that help. What is a message, Maura, that you can share with any of my viewers and listeners out there who are either, current active duty military or veterans listening out there who are struggling with mental health?
I think the biggest thing is that it is brave to get help and to talk to people. And that first step is scary. It was scary for me too, because I had to go to my manager, basically my NCO, and say, it was just for ADHD, but I said, something's not quite right. I'm really struggling right now. And I was lucky enough to have a leader in her who wanted to help me and wanted to give me access to those resources that would help me to thrive.
Yeah.
And so if you're a soldier who's struggling, don't be afraid to ask for help because it is brave.
It doesn't
It's
make you any less macho,
It doesn't.
at
No.
all.
I would say, I think it's, Tim, this is just me, but I think it's more macho to go get help and to be able to be healthy and strong than it is to put on a brave face and then end up hurting yourself. Or
I saw a funny meme the other day that was obviously directed towards Vladimir Putin, but it was like, yep, men would rather go invade Ukraine than go to therapy.
Go to therapy. I saw that one.
And it's so true. I mean, what you're saying is really on point. So I really do appreciate your platform. I think it hits close to home for everyone. I mean, who isn't struggling with mental health in this day and age? Maura, you're on the record saying something super cool, very profound. And if it's okay with you, I wanted to read it to my viewers and listeners. You said, quote, "I understand that I'm in a unique position, but that doesn't mean everyone can't do it. It's possible. It takes support. It takes a lot of hard work. The Army's evolving, and it's not full of the cookie cutter image we have of a soldier. It's full of people like you, people like me. Anyone can be a soldier. Anyone can be a title holder in the Miss America organization. All it takes is that support and that hard work and determination and never letting go of what you want. That was awesome. I mean, and you're saying this, I don't know what age you were when you gave this quote, maybe 21, 22, but what was the biggest challenge or gender biases that you've personally had to overcome in walking the fine line between being an active duty soldier in the U.S. Army while also competing in these pageants?
I think it mainly comes again from people on social media who have never even met me, because I talk about all the time, my leadership is amazing. And I think it's important to say that everyone that I work with doesn't see me as a woman who happens to be in the Army. They see me as a soldier who's doing her job.
I love that.
And the people who signed off and said, yep, you should go win Miss Colorado because I think that you're going to change the way that people see not only, Miss America organization, but the Army, were two men. Where my battalion leadership was, Colonel Betty, Lieutenant Colonel Betty, he's now a full bird, and my sergeant major son. And they were the ones who were like, yep, we 100% believe in what you're going to do. And it wasn't because I was a woman or in spite of me being a woman. It was because they believed in Specialist Spence.
Yes.
And I think that, again, we go back, I talk about leadership a lot. I talk about how we need good leadership, emotionally intelligent leadership. And so when those social media trolls came at me and they were like, oh, it must be nice to be a woman. It's like, you know what? I wasn't treated any differently because of the way that I look. I was treated according to the work that I put in. And because I had leadership that recognized that. And I hope that every soldier, every service member has that opportunity. But I recognize that they don't. And I think that's one of the things that we really need to work on is acknowledging how important good leadership is in allowing people to succeed.
I try not to get political on my podcast because that's not what this show is about. It's just not. I try not to go there. If a guest wants to go there, that's fine. My view is our world is divisive enough as it is, in large part thanks to the mainstream media. However, I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you how you feel about Fox News anchor Tucker Carlson's comments about women in the military. I know that his comments rattled and sort of sent shockwaves across all military branches when he made those sexist remarks. Even the Pentagon condemned his remarks after mocking U.S. servicewomen in maternity flight suits. He said, pregnant women are now going to fight our wars. I mean, look, again, not getting political here because I stand with our men and women in uniform, but Carlson, a man who has never served in the U.S. Armed Forces a day in his life, clearly sees any sort of accommodation to female service members as evidence that the military is going soft, implying that womanhood is somehow a show of weakness and incompatible with the hard work and determination needed to serve under hardship and to fight when necessary. Now, Maura, I don't know about you, but when I hear comments like that, but then see an elderly woman in the Ukraine carrying a gun, ready to be deployed to fight Russian troops, I don't know about you, but as a woman, I'm filled with tremendous pride. What is your reaction to that?
Well, I mean, if we go back to his comments, we have to first address the fact that femininity is not the opposite of strength. And I know enough women to know that the two are definitely not mutually exclusive. And also the fact that a pregnant woman in our Air Force who is serving honorably is in a flight suit doesn't mean she's necessarily fighting our wars, because you can't deploy if you're pregnant. So don't worry,
Didn't do his research on that.
And also most of our Air Force people work in, they stay in garrison and they still have maintenance jobs and they need to keep the planes running. They need to keep them fueled. And so they're going to wear flight suits because it's easier to take care of, to maintain, and to stay safe in than in the normal uniform. But it's also just ridiculous to say that women should not. It's so mind blowing to me, because again, it's this old idea that, well, men are always strong and women are inherently weak. And that's why it's bad that there are women in our military. When in reality, I've met men who I would not want to put anywhere near our armed forces. And I've met women who I've served with and who I haven't, that I look at and I go, yeah, I would trust you with my life. I would do anything to have you on my squad. And so it's just
I love
insane to me that we still have this idea that only women today are fighting our wars. Women have been fighting America's war since the Revolutionary War.
Amen.
They have always been on the battlefield. It's just in the last couple of decades that we finally recognize the contributions that women make to our armed forces.
Women in the military are a unique force of nature. In an effort to defend and fight for their country, they've been faced with countless challenges and obstacles denying them that right. Right now, only about 1 in 6 of the U.S. military's nearly 1.3 million active duty troops is female. The Air Force has, I think, the highest percentage, hovering around 20%, whereas the Marines has less than half that. But I thought this was attention grabbing because a recent study found female military personnel were 28% less likely to re-enlist than men due to concerns related to family planning and childcare, sexism, sexual assault, which happens in the military. What changes, if any, Maura, do you hope? Because I see you as a catalyst for change. I really do. And I think the future looks bright because of women like you. What changes, if any, do you hope to see in the future for women in the military?
It goes back to leadership. We need leadership that encourages women and sees them for the ability to do their job and to serve, not because of the way that they look. And when we start addressing that, when we start acknowledging not only the things that women accomplish, but just the things they do day to day, the fact they're able to maintain what we do. I mean, there are very boring things I do day in, day out that I don't need a pat on the back for, but I don't do it any worse or any better than any man just because I'm a woman. It depends on the person. And I think in order to see more women re-enlisting and more women joining the military, one, we need to start addressing sexual assault and sexual harassment more seriously. Again, we have leadership that takes it very, very seriously, but that is it's an epidemic that exists within the civilian sector and the military sector. And I think there's a lot of shame attached to it too.
Yeah.
Because I'm a woman. I've had experiences being harassed. I've had experiences where friends tell me about things they've experienced. And it's very difficult to take that first step. I would say it's even scarier than the stigma that's attached to receiving mental health care. Because at least when you go and get mental health care, if you go to therapy, if you receive treatment, people can say okay, they have depression or they have a substance abuse disorder. They want to solve, they want to get help for that. But if you have been a victim, and this applies to men and women, of sexual assault or sexual harassment,
Absolutely.
There's a big shame that's attached to it. I mean, women who are asked, well, what were you doing? What were you wearing? Why were you out? And I had friends who were just in their rooms.
Yeah. Tell me about it. I'm a living testament to that. I hold my head high proudly. I recently shared on this podcast a few episodes ago, hey, I'm a survivor of sexual assault, of rape. I mentioned on Gretchen's interview, I hold my head high and share my story because I had to work through a lot of that shame and guilt. I blamed myself for a lot of what had happened to me, which I know is very common among survivors of this kind of harassment and assault. But at the end of the day, it took a lot of work. It took a lot of therapy, a lot of self-reflection in digging deep and realizing that my story is the key that could unlock someone else's prison. And I think that the more we do talk about it and share our traumas and share these issues that need to be solved, the better and safer it's going to be for everyone. So
absolutely. And I think there's also a great deal of shame because people don't want to think it could happen to them.
Absolutely.
And it's easier to say oh, well, the victim did something. It doesn't matter if she asked for it or if she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. She did something wrong and I'm not going to do that. So I'm safe.
Right.
And
it doesn't matter. What were you wearing? Well, were you drinking ahead of time? Well, were you on drugs? Were you? No, rape is rape. It just doesn't matter. And I'm really glad that you shed a light on that. Just women in the military, hearing your perspective firsthand and what you've experienced and what you've witnessed. It's not lost on me that it is an issue there. It's not like it's non-existent. And I really do believe that women like you you're the future, Maura. And I think that you're going to really bring some much needed change. Maura, I think your story is so beyond powerful because look, you're setting an example for many young girls and guys out there that they can be anything they want to be, despite the lies that society might tell them, whether their dream is to join the Army or to compete in Miss America or to do both like you're doing. If it's something you want to do, then you should absolutely go for it.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, the worst thing someone can say is no. And even then, if you really want it, just keep going for it. I mean, I
use the word no as like ammunition. Like it lights a fire under me because when I'm rejected from an opportunity or a speaking gig or a job, I mean, great, on to the next, onward, upward.
I mean, I remember hearing that, no is shorthand for next opportunity.
Love that.
Right. And I just remember hearing no, it's not your time. It's not your time. And I finally got to the point where I was like, I'm not going to know when my time is. I'm not going to, bring too much of religion into it, but I'm a Christian. So I was like, I trust that whenever God's timing is when his timing is, but I'm just going to do everything I can to ready myself for when it is my time. And that way I don't have to go, oh man, I missed a great opportunity. Instead, I can say, I prepared myself to the best of my abilities. And if it's a no, okay, next opportunity. And if it's a yes, then wonderful, all that hard work paid off.
There's a quote I love that says, I forget the exact wording, but it's like, when the wind did not blow her way, she adjusted her sails, you know, and sailed off into a new direction. And oftentimes rejection and being told no, oftentimes more likely than not, puts us on a different trajectory and a path that, we never would have really imagined for ourselves, but makes us so much happier and fulfilled in the long run.
Yeah. I mean, when I was 17, 18 years old, I was struggling because I was like, I thought I was going to do what everyone else did. I thought I was going to graduate high school and go to college and get my degree. And then I would maybe get my master's and I would start working. And then eventually I'd go to law school. And I had, this.
And here you are juggling combat boots and wearing a crown. Yeah. Who would have thought?
And here I am, my life really fell apart before it came together, but
that has to happen sometimes.
Yeah, it was a mess, but it's one of the things that makes me so grateful for the life that I have right now. I mean, sometimes I wake up and I just go, God, I'm so glad I get to do this. Because when I was 16 years old, I started writing, or I think I was like 15, 16, I started writing in my journal saying, I'm going to write my own happy ending. And
love that. And don't give anyone else the pen, right?
Yep. Like I am the author of my destiny. I'm going to write it for myself. And I think one of the more beautiful things is that, this is the happy ending I want. Like I'm Miss Colorado. I'm in a career that I love. I'm serving my country. But more than that, I've realized that the story itself is the most beautiful part of all of it. It's not just the ending. And so I'm very thankful to have gotten that perspective over the last couple of years.
It's like a modern day Cinderella story, a modern day princess story. Well, Maura, you make your family and our country enormously proud. Thank you for your service. And hey, thank you for coming on Reinvented. I don't want to take up any more of your time here. I know you have much better things to do, but seriously, Maura, thank you. You are a joy.
Thank you so much.
To all my viewers and listeners, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to Reinvented with Jen Eckhart. That's available wherever you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, you name it, it's there. I'm Jen Eckhart. That was Maura Spence-Carroll. Thank you for listening.